MKF 1120 is the first year undergraduate marketing unit, where we have around about 700 students each semester. So it's a big unit, and it's a compulsory unit for all business students. A large proportion of them aren't majoring in marketing. They're doing accounting, for example, and some of those students aren't particularly excited about studying marketing. The way we used to do things was the old lecture tutorial model. We had a 2-hour lecture every week and a 1-hour tutorial. Students don't want to be attending lectures anymore, and I've seen that that's not an effective way for students to be learning. In setting up the pre-class activities, we had a look at the entire unit and effectively broke it down into all of the content delivery and then the interactive activities. And you can do that really with any unit. Of course, all of the content delivery, that didactic stuff, that particularly in a first year undergraduate unit where there's certain things that students just have to learn. So all of that we moved online into Moodle. Anything that involved interaction or students wanting to clarify or criticise or analyse some of the higher order Bloom's taxonomy areas, that then is of course the sort of thing that we do in the classroom. But anything that was content delivery, that moved online to Moodle. So we don't have the large lectures anymore. The beauty of this is that valuable class time where students are able to interact, engage with each other in active learning scenarios, which used to be the tutorials, we've now extended that to a 1.5-hour workshop. We are very careful in the way we think about how that should be structured. We want students to be there, engaged and learning during that hour and a half. Interestingly, not so much about technology. It's about the students facing each other, talking with each other and solving problems together. I'm fascinated to see over the next few years what happens now that, for example, secondary school kids are using iPads rather than textbooks, and that's really only been the last couple of years that's become mainstream. And I suspect as a result of that we're going to see a shift in the way our students over the next few years are learning. They'll be reading differently. They'll be more comfortable, I suspect, reading on screen as opposed to wanting to print everything out and read on paper. Let's see what happens over the next few years. And we typically break that 1.5-hour workshop up into 3 separate components. Typically the first half an hour or so is where we provide students with the opportunity to really reinforce the material that they've learnt prior to coming to class. Okay, so there's that connection from the pre-class activities through to the in-class activities. That involves a small group activity where the students are working together to solve problems, and that's worth a couple of marks every week towards their assessment. And that's consistent with our approach of encouraging and rewarding that pre-class work. Okay? If they're doing that pre-class work, then when they're in class, we're connecting it and they'll be rewarded if they have done that work. The next half hour, it's not all that different to a problem-based learning approach where we give students small problems to solve in their groups, and those groups then have about half an hour to brainstorm ideas and look for solutions to the problem. Obviously connecting that problem back to the theory they've learnt prior to coming to class. Then the final half hour is when they then report back. They take their findings and we work the room and have each group then report back to the larger group as to how they solved the problem they were given. Of course, this approach with the 1.5-hour workshop, we want it to be an interactive space. We don't want the teaching staff to be lecturing the students during this time. This is to be student-centred. So we can't use a standard classroom. We actually worked with the facilities people here and changed the configuration of an existing classroom to ensure that the student-centred approach actually happened. It seats around about 60 students. So I actually have 2 teaching staff in the room for each of these workshops. We have round tables, there's 8 round tables in the room, and each table has 8 chairs at it. However, we only seat 7 students at each table because that 8th seat is there for the teaching staff, the tutor, to come down and sit down with the students to facilitate that discussion. I'm not taking the front seat though. It's really a secondary role, making sure the students are working on solving the problem, they're addressing the main issues, they're connecting back to the theory they've learnt prior to coming to class. This room doesn't have a front. There's no lectern at the front of the room because we don't want the teachers to be lecturing in this room. Instead, we have on each of the 4 walls a screen where we can project to remind students of some of the theory they've learned prior to coming to class, to really act as a foundation piece of theory to help them solve their problems. But ultimately, this is a student-centered place, and it's, interestingly, not so much about technology. It's about the students facing each other, talking with each other, and solving problems together.